Hi, everyone. We are live. Hopefully, the sound is all right. I'm trying to work on the echo. So, this is not the typical live video that we do on Fridays, for example. This is, I saw some interesting stories pop up today and yesterday as well. Actually, we're going to do two lives tonight. I'm doing this story now, and then when I'm done with this, I'm going to pop off, start a new live for you guys with a different story that has been developing over the last couple of days. This is the easiest and fastest way to get you guys this information while also beating out the YouTube algorithms. So I'm glad to see that despite it being a funky, weird time without a ton of notice, we've got some folks here. So we are going to dive right into it. So today's video was inspired by a post that I saw by Spike Cohen talking about new restrictions that were put in place in Minnesota just this week. Basically, the short version of it is they are urging all Minnesotans, people of Minnesota, to cancel their Thanksgiving under threats of jail time and fines. And that's if you're caught. If it's just found that you are threatening to ignore these new guidelines put in place in Minnesota, well, that fine is up to $25,000. And I saw this post, and originally I just saw the graphic and didn't see who posted it. And I said, well, golly, I mean, that's pretty extreme. There's a lot of extreme stuff going on right now, but there's no way that that one's true. But then again, I didn't think that it was true that they had banned walking your dog in Australia, and apparently they have. So there we go. So I decided to look into this, and yes, the restrictions in Minnesota are just nuts. And of course, Minnesota is not the only state to urge people to cancel their Thanksgivings and put all of these new guidelines in place that basically force people to give up their holidays and family time under threat of violence or, you'll kill grandma. You'll bury grandma by Christmas, says one fellow that we'll see in a moment. And now even the CDC has come out and put out some pretty ridiculous suggestions as to how people can enjoy their Thanksgivings. Hint, it will not at all be enjoyable. So let's hop over to some of these articles here so that you guys can look at it with me here. So the first one that we have, so this is the one about Minnesota. Here, this is from CBS News. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, I believe that's how you pronounce it, announces new COVID-19 restrictions in response to surge. And this was just published today. So this is news just out today. So this says that the new restrictions that Minnesota has in place with this really annoying video here. These go into effect this week and will be in effect until December 18th. So these start Friday at midnight and will go for about a little less than a month until December 18th. But then, of course, Christmas starts. So, of course, they'll be restarted then as well. So these restrictions target a whole number of social activities, including gatherings between households, indoor dining, and youth sports. Interestingly enough, college and professional sports aren't going to be affected, but that's probably because they make people money. Of course. So these restrictions include things such as gyms being closed. Any organized adult and youth sports are now suspended. Bowling alleys closed, theaters closed, bingo halls closed, receptions, private parties, and other celebrations have to be completely canceled, and even now outdoor events with large numbers of people are being put on hold. And their definition of what a large gathering is also scales with the length of time that these restrictions are going on. So it starts out with, I believe, a restriction of 50 people, and then the number of allowed people keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller as time goes on. And he talks about sacrifice and the important sacrifices that need to be made. And he also, in his new orders, stressed the importance of wearing masks, noting it is not debatable whether or not they help, despite the fact that, well, just today, a new study came out of Denmark that actually suggests that no, masks don't do much of anything at all. And it's interesting that the same day that that study is coming out and being publicized, people are doubling down on the whole mask thing. And I believe in Pennsylvania now they're even telling people that you need to wear masks inside your own home. That has already happened in Massachusetts, despite the number of people who live in Massachusetts and commented on my video about that, saying that that wasn't true. I also lived in Massachusetts at the time, and it was, in fact, very true. I screen capped the government website for them so they could see it right in the video. But of course, you can tell that no one actually watches the whole video when they say that's not true. But again, it was a screenshot of the government website. So more about these restrictions is included in this. First of all, he said that he feels like the guy in Footloose. I thought that this was a funny quote, so I highlighted it to make sure I told you guys. This governor of Minnesota says, I feel like the guy in Footloose. No dancing, no fun, no whatever. That's not my intention. My intention is to keep you safe so you can all dance a lot longer and that our neighbors don't put them at risk. But I recognize this is painful and it's no fun. Well, it's funny because the whole plot about that movie was people rising up and defying those orders and going and having black market dance parties anyways. So it's interesting that he compares it to Footloose. So starting Friday, again, all bars and restaurants have to close all of their dine-in services at 10 p.m. and they have to stay closed until 4 a.m. because coronavirus knows how to tell time and only comes out at night. Indoor capacity at these restaurants is to be capped at 150 people or 50% capacity. It depends on whichever one is bigger, but absolutely cannot go past 50% capacity. Rather, it is capped at whichever one is smaller. So if your restaurant is a little mom and pop place and say only can fit 100 people, well, then you're stuck at 50 because that is 50%. So what this is going to do is cause a lot more small businesses to close down because they're not going to make it through a second round of this stuff. There are already so many that closed in the first round and so many that barely scraped by because I don't think people realize how thin the margins are in the restaurant industry. It's only 1% to 6%. That's about it. So, I mean, you are forced to go at half capacity or something, but you're still, or you aren't able to open at all, but you still have to pay your overhead of like your rent and utility bills and things like that. I mean, the math doesn't add up. There's no profit there. They're just continually going in the hole. And then we have Congress yet again saying they're not going to extend any of the help given to small businesses, and they're not going to extend any of those loan or grant programs or anything for small businesses. I mean, these businesses, if they survived the first wave, they're not going to survive the second. Bar counter service is also completely shut down unless the place only has bar counter service. So that's probably, your breakfast places, coffee joints, whatever that has the stools at the counter or something. So restaurants can have up to 150 people or 50% of their capacity if the 50% number is lower. But there is a 10-person limit now for all indoor and outdoor gatherings, and all social gatherings are limited to members of 3 households or less. Now, I have seen some varying information on this. Some news outlets are reporting that it's only 1 household. Some are reporting it's 3. Now, some people might say, oh, well, that's fine. Just have my immediate family members or something. It's not really that fine. I mean, 10 people, you could say, might be a decent sized Thanksgiving. But Someone who is writing for the Federalist makes a very interesting point. If I can find my mouse cursor. There we go. And that was, oh, did I lose it? I must have moved it to another window. But basically, someone over at the Federalist pointed out that something like 70% of American households have children that have grown up and have left the home, and they have 2 or more children. So if all of these children are adults or have gone off to college, or, maybe there's a divorce and they live with the other family member half of the time or something, each one of those is considered a different household. So some of these families are now going to have to choose which children attend family dinner if they're going to have a dinner for Thanksgiving. That is ridiculous. They're telling you which family members, which of your own children possibly can or cannot be allowed in your house. And now they're also saying that, they're not going to enforce this. He said, traditionally, he said that his Thanksgiving has 24 members of his extended family, but this year it'll only be him, his wife, and his 2 children. While technically violating parts of the order would be a misdemeanor, he says that they aren't going to be sending officers around door to door to check. But the funny thing about that is if they're not going around they're not checking or arresting people or technically enforcing this, then number one, why put it in place in the first place? And number two, why emphasize the fact that you could have $1,000 fine or 90 days in jail? If they are not planning on enforcing this or sending police to door, then why, again, tell the news outlets and have them report that violating this executive order would be $1,000 fine or 90 days in jail? Now, okay, so maybe they're playing a little game of semantics here, and they aren't going to be sending police officers door to door. But what if, a neighbor says, oh, hey, there are 5 cars next door, or there's 7 cars across the street, as many governors have encouraged their residents to do, and cops show up and they see this family having their Thanksgiving dinner, and oh no, well, there's 3 different households there. So what'll happen? Are they going to have that fine? Are they going to have their 90 days in jail? Jail seems like it's a lot more dangerous for COVID than a simple family dinner. And the thing is so even if people are in different households, for example, I have a whole bunch of clients that are adults and live in their own homes, and they have adult children, and their adult children live elsewhere, but they have constant contact with them on an almost daily basis, or with their parents on a weekly or a few times a week basis. So those are all people that they're already in regular contact with anyways. If you are in your own house and the only people that you ever see is your children over in this house over here and your parents over here and, maybe your sister or brother over here, then you're already mixing those households anyways. So why is it specifically requested just now for this holiday season? I think that that's a really good question. And I haven't been able to find where exactly this is written, but according to Spike Cohen, even just talking about violating this order or threatening to violate this order is a $25,000 fine. That is absolutely ridiculous. $25,000 for saying I'm still going to have my Thanksgiving meal. Absolutely insane. Absolutely nuts. So this again says new set of restrictions for a limit of 10 people for inside or outdoor gatherings. It used to be a 25-person cap, so it's been cut in more than half. And again, this website, this news outlet, The Pine Journal, which we had to do through archive because they want you to subscribe otherwise, also says no more than 3 households gathering for any social events. And what's also interesting about this is they say that this order is specifically meant to target 18 to 35-year-olds, which he says is a major source of the spread in Minnesota, specifically, oddly. But what's interesting is 18 to 35-year-olds are also the ones by the CDC's own numbers that have the lowest infection rates and the lowest fatality rates. And there still is no actual evidence that if you are asymptomatic, that you can spread it to anyone. Because if you're not coughing or sneezing and you don't have symptoms, then, I mean, coughing and sneezing is supposed to be the primary mode of spread, right? Or if you cough on your hands and then rub it on somewhere and then someone touches it, blah, 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 blah. So if you're asymptomatic and you're not supposed to be able to spread it when you're asymptomatic, and people aren't really leaving the house if they're sick, and if 18 to 35-year-olds are some of the people that are least effective and have the lowest fatality rates, and they're not really even catching it that much, how are they the ones that are specifically spreading this, according to Walls? He also says that restaurants, when they reopened, there was a small spike, but it can only account for 2% of the new cases in Minnesota. So if restaurants are only 2% of the case rate, then why are we putting such restrictions on restaurants? If they are only accounting for 2% of the case spread. So this is just Minnesota. We have some fun guidelines here out of California. Now, California put their guidelines out way back in October. And I had originally wanted to do a video about this, and life happened. But check this out. So this was October 9th. So this was over a month ago. And this was Gavin Newsom's, the wonderful Gavin Newsom's, most recent restrictions for holidays. Now, these are ridiculous. So here, this says that gatherings include more than 3 households are prohibited. I believe that this has now been changed, and it is 1 household, and that's it. Another part of Gavin Newsom's new orders, is that the host needs to collect the names of all attendees and their contact information in case contact tracing is needed later. Well, if they're your household, I would expect that you know their names and their contact information, number one. But number two, this is something they're doing at restaurants now. And it's really interesting because this is happening in a few different states with their restaurants. I know it's going on in Colorado and a few other places. Massachusetts has been doing this since day one when they reopened their dining. And it's funny because no one in Massachusetts really batted an eye except for anywhere that my husband went. He gave my phone number because he didn't want to give out his. So my name and number were everywhere in Massachusetts. And now some people were like, oh, well, okay, restaurants, if someone gets sick at a restaurant, then the restaurant needs to know who was there and how to get in touch with them. I don't agree with that, but devil's advocate will say, okay, that's the case. Why do we have to do this for Thanksgiving dinner? Why do we have to do this for Christmas? Why do we have to do this for just someone coming to your house? It could be for any gathering. This doesn't even specifically name Thanksgiving. Any social gathering of 3 households or more, now 1 household, according to the newest updates, I believe. So say someone stops by for dinner. Are you expected to take down their contact information and keep a record of the fact that they were there for a random Wednesday night dinner? Or like, I don't know, Saturday brunch. Now, it's a good thing that this is California because all gatherings also have to be held outside. If you're going to go inside, it's only to use the bathroom, and the owner of the home or the host of the gathering has to consistently and constantly be sanitizing their bathroom pretty much any time someone has to go in and use it. These are also rules in Massachusetts for businesses, which is why I never reopened my practice in Massachusetts after COVID hit, because restroom cleaning was supposed to be in my lease, and they didn't have people doing it, and I wasn't going to be going and scrubbing a bathroom in the 10 minutes that I have in between clients. But regardless, so if you stop by for brunch over at your friend's house on a Sunday in California, because you're in a different household, you have to stay outside unless you have to go to the bathroom. And then when you go to the bathroom, your friend has to go in right behind you and Lysol the crap out of everything to follow California's orders. Now, the other thing is, you can be outside and you can be under a covering, right? But this covering has also very specific rules that it has to be open on at least 3 sides randomly. So you can have an umbrella, you can have an awning, or a roof or other shade structures, but it has to be 75% open to the outdoors. So like that even disqualifies a lean-to. So that's just like a pop-up tent or something. Better hope that there's no inclement weather. Also, none of these gatherings can meet in a public park or an other outdoor space. And you very specifically, it's interesting because they knew that people were going to try to find some loopholes. So if you go to a park and there's a couple little gatherings happening at the park, if they're in different households, you can't go and say hi or intermingle. And you also cannot have 3 different people from different households organize gatherings that will conveniently and coincidentally meet all at the same time. Strictly forbidden. Right in the executive order on the California state website that you cannot do that. Mixing between group gatherings is not allowed. And if you're not feeling well, of course, you have to stay home and not come into contact with anyone outside of their household. That's pretty standard COVID guidelines at this point. Now, not only do these gatherings have to be outside according to California, but the space must be large enough so that every person can sit or stand 6 feet apart in all directions. So I guess technically your table has to be however many feet long, but also 6 feet wide to follow these guidelines. It says right here, seating must be provided at least 6 feet of distance in all directions, front to back and side to side. You also have to have a hand washing station or provide hand sanitizer. People have to maintain a 6-foot distance from each other at all times, and all food and drinks have to be strictly in single-serve containers. Which is also interesting because these containers have to be disposable. They cannot be washable, despite the fact that California is so worried about things like plastic straws and recycling waste. Self-serve items cannot be used. Communal containers cannot be used. So you technically can't even use Tupperware unless you're planning to throw each piece out. Strictly plastic plates, tinfoil, Ziploc bags, I don't know, all things that California usually doesn't like because it goes in the landfills and, gets out to sea and messes with dolphins or turtles or something. You also have to be wearing a mask at all times. You're allowed to take it off to eat or drink, but only during the very active and direct actions of eating or drinking. So if you take a bite and put your fork down, technically, under California rules, you're supposed to put your mask back on. Like, if you put your fork down or, pause to grab a roll that you're technically not supposed to be touching or grabbing because it's supposed to be in a special, specific Ziploc bag with your name on it. And to top it all off, Gatherings are only allowed to be 2 hours. Any more than that, and you are suddenly at higher risk for COVID, despite all the other restrictions that are supposed to be in place. And it's interesting because the CDC and social distancing guidelines all talk about like a 15-minute time limit. But I guess for Thanksgiving or whatever outside, you're allowed 2 hours. But any more than that, and you can get in trouble. They also stopped short of banning it, but are very strongly discouraging singing, chanting, and shouting, which to me is code for prayer. And I'm not even a religious person, but I read that, and the first thing I thought is, well, they're telling people not to pray at Thanksgiving or, at their Sunday meals or Shabbat or any of those things. Right there, they're telling people that you're not supposed to pray. If you are going to pray, you are asked to please whisper it at or below the volume of a normal speaking voice. So if you're going to pray, you should do so in a whisper and while wearing a mask, again, while 6 feet apart or further to mitigate the risk from increased chanting or singing or something. And so because of that, as well, in a similar vein, musicians, if there's music, they're all supposed to be 6 feet apart, but no wind instruments. Specifically, they don't want you playing any wind instruments because that could, your saxophone could explode COVID all over the place or something. If you are going to be playing an instrument, well, then you should be more than 6 feet apart from people, just in case, even if it's a stupid piano. So that's California. And what's fun about this is, remember how I told you right here, this is October 9th that Gavin Newsom put that in place. Well, interestingly enough, on November 6th, he went to this fancy restaurant called the French Laundry in the middle of these restrictions. And what's funny is there were a whole bunch of political people there with him, and they were from all different households, and they're all sitting shoulder to shoulder here. And I believe there were more than 10 of them, and again, from all different households. And look at that, they're not wearing masks, even though none of them have a fork in their hand, and none of them have the glass in their hand. And he claimed, well, he was very embarrassed and offended that he got caught doing this and going out to this dinner party. I believe it was a birthday party. Yes, it was a 50th birthday party of his friend, who was a political strategist. You can also see in the picture, there's some fellow named Dustin Corcoran, who is the CEO of the California Medical Association. So someone from the Medical Association who supposedly helped craft these guidelines is just sitting there, violating them all over the place. And of course, the other person that we can see in the picture is a lobbyist. And even though, again, Gavin Newsom is telling people that they need to wear masks and face coverings unless they are actively eating or drinking, there's none. I mean, they don't even have them on their necks. It doesn't look like there's really any sitting on the table. And so when this first came to light, he tried to say, oh, well, so it was a mistake and I didn't violate the law. I violated the spirit of the law, is what he told people. And he also claimed that it was okay because, well, this specific county wasn't as high risk as the other counties in the state. And he also told them that it was an outdoor restaurant. Well, this doesn't look very outdoor. And the thing is more photos resurfaced of this. And it turns out that they were, in fact, eating indoors. And there is an outdoor patio, but they were inside. And now when they first started eating, these sliding glass doors were open. But supposedly these people who are supposed to be 6 feet apart and talking in no more than a whisper to each other, or else they can spread COVID, were so loud that the sliding doors actually had to be closed so as to not disturb the other guests at the restaurant. True story. And of course, instead of apologizing or recognizing that he was breaking the law, again, he talked about the spirit of the law and that he made a mistake. And he was like, oh, well, as soon as I got there, I realized that it was a larger group than I had anticipated. But still, he decided to sit down. And even if it was a larger group than anticipated, he still knew that there were going to be multiple people from different households and violated his own guidelines. But he said, we can quibble about the guidelines, but the spirit of what I'm preaching all the time was contradicted, and I gotta own that. But still, while he's going out to having these, fancy dinners, he does not want the people of California to have their Thanksgiving. And it's not just California anymore. We also have some CDC guidelines, and this will be the last thing that I touch on before I sign off and get the other live stream ready for you guys, because I don't want to keep this too long. New guidance from the CDC that was just issued on Thursday, today. This is from Axios. And the new guidance says that Americans shouldn't be traveling at all for Thanksgiving, and that doing so will increase the chance of getting and spreading COVID-19. And they have redefined the definition of household to include only people currently living in one's home for the past 14 days, which specifically excludes college students and older relatives. So the college kids, a lot of them in Massachusetts, for example, are being sent home just this week. On Friday, some of them, they are sending the kids home on Tuesday of next week. And then they're not going back to school after that until the spring. But that means that they won't be there for the 14 days before the holiday. So technically speaking, they are now considered a different household and are violating CDC guidelines. They're saying it's not a mandate, but it is strongly recommended. And if you are someone living in a blue state and you are caught violating this, well, my goodness, you will be ostracized and crucified and practically burned at the stake. Again, coming from someone who until 2 months ago lived in Massachusetts. They also, I don't know if this is in the new guidance, but in the old guidance, they were specifically encouraging everyone to just Zoom for Thanksgiving, because that's way better than having any actual social contact with anyone anyways. So they also want you to try to use the CDC COVID data tracker before deciding if you are going to have Thanksgiving or not. And in fact, the LA Times actually created a whole new tool where you can plug in the size of your gathering and what county you live in to find out your exact risk of contracting COVID-19 or being in contact with someone who has had COVID-19. And I don't really believe the accuracy of their numbers because, I mean, the way that they showed my county that I'm in now, my goodness, I have gone to a lot of Walmarts without a mask. And if it was really as dangerous as their tool suggests, I probably would have gotten COVID by now. And if you do travel, you have to check your travel restrictions, because there are a lot of states now that are not letting anyone over their borders. And if they do, they require you to have a negative COVID test. There is a huge black market being created in some areas now, and even across Europe, for black market negative COVID tests. I read about that today. It was very interesting. They suggest that everyone gets a flu shot before they travel, even though the flu shot notoriously is not all that effective. Wear your mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from everyone. Don't touch anything on your body Practically, bring extra masks and hand sanitizer. Everyone at Thanksgiving is supposed to wear a mask. Everyone is supposed to be 6 feet apart from each other. Washing your hands constantly or using 60% alcohol content hand sanitizer. Interesting thing about that, if you put 5 layers on and don't wash your hands in between, it is rendered ineffective. Fun fact that I learned while working in a nursing home. Bring your own food to your Thanksgiving dinner. Bring your own drinks, plates, cups, and utensils. Do not use anything that comes from another person's house on your Thanksgiving. That is what the CDC is telling you to do. Don't go in any areas where food is being prepared or handled. Don't even cook if you can manage it. And again, the CDC is also telling people to use single-use options like single-serve condiment packets and salad dressings and all disposable items. Again, all of the plastics and things like that a lot of these blue states didn't like up until March, funnily enough. Also, this is where they suggest that people celebrate virtually for their Thanksgiving or only with people you live with in order to protect your community. If you absolutely have to see someone outside of your household, you should really do it outside, according to the CDC. And make sure you talk to everyone ahead of time so they know all the rules and guidelines. Clean and disinfect stuff pretty much anytime someone touches it. And if you are going to be celebrating indoors, well, turn off your heat because you're supposed to have the windows and doors open to get some airflow. And again, it tells you if you're a host to have people bring their own food and drink and their own single-serve utensils. So I don't really understand how that's supposed to work if you are hosting Thanksgiving. I guess it really is that everyone's supposed to be cooking their own Thanksgiving dinner and bringing it with them in little, I mean, you can't even use Tupperware. So I guess, cook a turkey and slap some stuffing in a Ziploc bag and away you go. This is what the world has come to, apparently. So I see that some super chats did come through, so I am going to read those. And hopefully you guys don't live in any of these states, but I know a few of you do. So let's see. Joe Marisol says, WTF, I get to watch Liberty Doll live again. F yeah. And bonus, like I said, I'll be shutting this one down in a few minutes and popping over to another one. I've already gone over 15 minutes over what I wanted to do. Mr. Twisted said, hello from California, the home premiere gruesome. Well, then you are intimately aware of these guidelines. Miso Trashed says, while holding a turkey leg from my cold dead hands. Jim Broman, thank you for the super chat. And J. Derek Williams says, have you watched the COVID Cult Mises Institute lecture by Tom Woods? I've been sharing it with all of my sheeple friends. Not yet. I was actually supposed to be at that event, I believe, and unfortunately, some issues came up that prevented that, but I feel like this is a really sudden ending, but I'm going to sign off and start setting up the live stream and info for the next one for you guys, and that will be all about some crazy hijinks that are happening in Michigan with people certifying the election and then not certifying it and getting doxxed and threatened and all this crazy stuff. So thank you everyone for tuning in on such short notice. If you like my work and want to help support this channel and have more of these fast track streams and videos coming to you, please check out the partners in the description. I only get a kickback if you buy something. That is true. Or consider supporting my channel through Patreon, PayPal, Subscribestar, or some merch from my website. I will see you guys in probably about 10 to 15 minutes. See you in the next one.